At Mercy General Hospital, Dr. Amanda Foster was waiting when the ambulance arrived. She had been briefed about the unusual case and had prepared a quiet room away from the busy emergency department. The twins were wheeled in, still maintaining their rigid posture, their eyes wide open but unfocused. Sarah followed the stretcher into the examination room, the mysterious note weighing heavily in her evidence bag. She watched as Dr. Foster began her initial assessment of the girls. Their vital signs were stable but unusual. Their heart rates were perfectly synchronized at exactly 72 beats per minute, and their body temperature was slightly below normal. "Have you been able to identify them yet?" Dr. Foster asked while gently examining Emma's eyes with a small flashlight. Sarah shook her head. "We've run their descriptions through missing children databases, but no matches so far. It's like they appeared out of nowhere." Dr. Foster moved to examine Ella, noting that both girls had the same unusual eye response to light. Their pupils dilated and contracted in perfect unison, even though she was only shining the light in one girl's eyes at a time. "I need to examine those marks on their necks," Dr. Foster said. Sarah helped her carefully move the girl's braided hair aside to reveal the puncture wounds. Under the bright examination light, the marks were clearly visible. They were small, precise, and appeared to be recent, possibly made within the last 24 hours. "These look like injection sites," Dr. Foster murmured, taking detailed photographs. "But I've never seen anything quite like this pattern. There are actually 2 puncture marks on each girl, very close together." A nurse entered the room with the results of the blood test that had been rushed through the lab. Dr. Foster reviewed the paperwork, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Their blood work shows traces of a compound I don't recognize. And look at this." She showed Sarah the results. "Their brainwave patterns are identical. Not similar, identical. That shouldn't be possible, even with twins." Sarah studied the medical reports, trying to make sense of the information. Could they have been drugged? Definitely. But whatever was used isn't showing up in our standard toxicology screens. We'll need to send samples to a specialized laboratory. Dr. Foster paused, looking troubled. "There's something else. Their memories appear to have been affected. When I tried basic neurological tests, they couldn't remember simple things like colors or numbers. But they can still speak and understand language." Meanwhile, Detective Ray Coleman had arrived at the hospital to take over the investigation. Sarah briefed him on everything that had happened, including the discovery of the note. Ray was a veteran detective who had seen his share of unusual cases, but even he seemed unsettled by the twins' condition. "Any luck with the missing person search?" Ray asked. "Nothing yet," Sarah replied. "But I did find something interesting. The cemetery across from where they were found has been closed for renovations for the past month. The construction workers have been reporting strange things." Ray raised an eyebrow. "What kind of strange things?" "Lights in the old mausoleum at night. Sounds of children playing when no one should be there. The foreman said his crew refused to work near the older section of the cemetery after some of them claimed to see 2 little girls watching them from the shadows." Back in the examination room, Dr. Foster was conducting more tests when something unexpected happened. Emma suddenly spoke, her voice still flat but clearer than before. "The man with the white coat said we would forget," Emma said, staring at the ceiling. Ella immediately followed. "But the shots didn't work like they were supposed to." Dr. Foster and the nurse exchanged startled glances. These were the first spontaneous words the girls had spoken since being found. "What man?" Dr. Foster asked gently. "Can you tell me about the man with the white coat?" Both girls turned their heads to look directly at her, their movements still unnaturally synchronized. "He had a long needle," Emma said. "And a room with bright lights," Ella added. "Where was this room?" Dr. Foster pressed. The twins looked at each other for the first time since being found. For a moment, their robotic expressions seemed to soften, and they looked like normal, frightened children. "Under the ground," they said together, their voices overlapping perfectly. "Where the old people sleep." Dr. Foster felt a chill run through her. She immediately called Sarah back into the room and had the conversation recorded. The girls continued to speak in fragments, describing an underground laboratory beneath the cemetery, a man in a white coat who performed experiments, and other children who went to sleep and never woke up. "We were supposed to forget," Emma said sadly. "But we remember the needle room," Ella continued. "And the crying," they said together. Sarah and Dr. Foster realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than they had initially thought. These girls hadn't just been abandoned. They had been victims of something terrible, and they might be the key to uncovering a much larger crime. As the afternoon wore on, more fragments of memory began surfacing. The twins described being taken from somewhere safe, driven in a dark van and brought to the underground facility. They remembered other children, some older, some younger, but couldn't recall what happened to them. The man said we were special, Emma whispered. Because we're the same, Ella added. Sarah looked at the notes she had been taking, trying to piece together the horrifying picture that was emerging. Someone had been experimenting on children, using the abandoned cemetery as cover for their activities. And these two little girls had somehow escaped or been released, their memories partially intact despite attempts to erase them. The mystery was deepening, and Sarah knew they were just beginning to uncover the truth. Officer Sarah Martinez had seen many strange things during her 15 years on the police force, but nothing had prepared her for what she found that cold Tuesday morning. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. from a worried jogger who spotted two small figures sitting perfectly still on a park bench near the old cemetery. When Sarah arrived at Maple Grove Park, the morning mist was still hanging low over the grass. There, on the weathered wooden bench, sat two identical twin girls who appeared to be around 8 years old. They wore matching white dresses that seemed too clean for children who had supposedly been outside all night. Their long dark hair was neatly braided and their pale blue eyes stared straight ahead without blinking. Sarah approached slowly, her hand instinctively resting on her radio. The girls didn't move or acknowledge her presence. They sat with their hands folded in their laps, their backs straight, and their feet dangling just above the ground. The silence was unsettling. "Hello there," Sarah said gently, crouching down to their eye level. "I'm Officer Martinez. Can you tell me your names?" The twins turned their heads in perfect unison, their movements so synchronized it made Sarah's skin crawl. The girl on the left spoke first, her voice flat and emotionless. "I'm Emma." The girl on the right followed immediately. "I'm Ella." Then they both turned back to stare ahead as if Sarah wasn't there. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something was very wrong here. She had dealt with lost children before, but these girls showed no signs of distress, fear, or confusion. They seemed almost robotic in their behavior. "Where are your parents?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm and reassuring. The twins didn't respond. They continued staring straight ahead at the cemetery gates across the street. Sarah called for backup and requested a social worker to the scene. While waiting, she tried to engage the girls in conversation, but they only spoke when directly asked their names, repeating the same responses in the same flat tone. They wouldn't answer questions about where they lived, how they got to the park, or when they had last eaten. When Officer Mike Thompson arrived, he was equally disturbed by the girls' behavior. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered to Sarah. "They're like little statues." The social worker, Mrs. Chen, arrived shortly after and attempted her own approach with the girls. She offered them juice boxes and crackers, but they didn't respond. She tried showing them picture books and toys from her emergency kit, but the twins remained motionless except for their synchronized head movements when asked their names. As the morning wore on, more people gathered. The jogger who had called it in stayed to watch from a distance. A few early dog walkers stopped to stare. Local news crews began arriving after someone posted about the strange scene on social media. Sarah noticed that the girls never seemed to blink. Their breathing was so shallow it was barely noticeable. Most disturbing of all, they never moved their feet or shifted their position on the bench, even though sitting still for hours would be nearly impossible for normal children their age. Dr. Rebecca Hayes, a child psychologist called to the scene, examined the girls without touching them. "This level of dissociation is extremely unusual," she told Sarah quietly. "It's as if they're in some kind of trance state. We need to get them to a hospital for evaluation." When the ambulance arrived, the twins finally showed their first sign of distress. As the paramedics approached with a stretcher, both girls gripped the bench with their small hands and let out an identical, piercing scream that lasted exactly 10 seconds. Then they returned to their previous state of silence and stillness. The paramedics managed to gently lift the girls, who remained rigid like dolls. As they were placed in the ambulance, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the back of each girl's neck, partially hidden by their braided hair, was a small, fresh puncture mark. Sarah quickly took photos of the marks before the ambulance doors closed. She had a sinking feeling that this case was about to become much more complicated than a simple case of abandoned children. As the ambulance pulled away, Sarah looked back at the empty bench. Something white caught her eye in the grass beneath where the girls had been sitting. She bent down and picked up a small piece of paper, folded neatly in half. Written in a child's handwriting were the words, "We remember everything now." The paper was completely dry despite the morning dew that covered everything else in the park. Sarah felt her hands tremble as she placed the note in an evidence bag. Whatever had happened to Emma and Ella, she was determined to find out the truth, no matter how disturbing it might be. At Mercy General Hospital, Dr. Amanda Foster was waiting when the ambulance arrived. She had been briefed about the unusual case and had prepared a quiet room away from the busy emergency department. The twins were wheeled in, still maintaining their rigid posture, their eyes wide open but unfocused. Sarah followed the stretcher into the examination room, the mysterious note weighing heavily in her evidence bag. She watched as Dr. Foster began her initial assessment of the girls. Their vital signs were stable but unusual. Their heart rates were perfectly synchronized at exactly 72 beats per minute, and their body temperature was slightly below normal. "Have you been able to identify them yet?" Dr. Foster asked while gently examining Emma's eyes with a small flashlight. Sarah shook her head. "We've run their descriptions through missing children databases, but no matches so far. It's like they appeared out of nowhere." Dr. Foster moved to examine Ella, noting that both girls had the same unusual eye response to light. Their pupils dilated and contracted in perfect unison, even though she was only shining the light in one girl's eyes at a time. "I need to examine those marks on their necks," Dr. Foster said. Sarah helped her carefully move the girl's braided hair aside to reveal the puncture wounds. Under the bright examination light, the marks were clearly visible. They were small, precise, and appeared to be recent, possibly made within the last 24 hours. "These look like injection sites," Dr. Foster murmured, taking detailed photographs. "But I've never seen anything quite like this pattern. There are actually 2 puncture marks on each girl, very close together." A nurse entered the room with the results of the blood tests that had been rushed through the lab. Dr. Foster reviewed the paperwork, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Their blood work shows traces of a compound I don't recognize. And look at this." She showed Sarah the results. "Their brainwave patterns are identical. Not similar, identical. That shouldn't be possible, even with twins." Sarah studied the medical reports, trying to make sense of the information. Could they have been drugged? Definitely. But whatever was used isn't showing up in our standard toxicology screens. We'll need to send samples to a specialized laboratory. Dr. Foster paused, looking troubled. "There's something else. Their memories appear to have been affected. When I tried basic neurological tests, they couldn't remember simple things like colors or numbers, but they can still speak and understand language." Meanwhile, Detective Ray Coleman had arrived at the hospital to take over the investigation. Sarah briefed him on everything that had happened, including the discovery of the note. Ray was a veteran detective who had seen his share of unusual cases, but even he seemed unsettled by the twins' condition. "Any luck with the missing person search?" Ray asked. "Nothing yet," Sarah replied. "But I did find something interesting. The cemetery across from where they were found has been closed for renovations for the past month. The construction workers have been reporting strange things." Ray raised an eyebrow. "What kind of strange things?" "Lights in the old mausoleum at night, sounds of children playing when no one should be there. The foreman said his crew refused to work near the older section of the cemetery, after some of them claimed to see 2 little girls watching them from the shadows." Back in the examination room, Dr. Foster was conducting more tests when something unexpected happened. Emma suddenly spoke, her voice still flat but clearer than before. "The man with the white coat said we would forget," Emma said. Staring at the ceiling, Ella immediately followed. "But the shots didn't work like they were supposed to." Dr. Foster and the nurse exchanged startled glances. These were the first spontaneous words the girls had spoken since being found. "What man?" Dr. Foster asked gently. "Can you tell me about the man with the white coat?" Both girls turned their heads to look directly at her, their movements still unnaturally synchronized. He had a long needle, Emma said. And a room with bright lights, Ella added. Where was this room? Dr. Foster pressed. The twins looked at each other for the first time since being found. For a moment, their robotic expressions seemed to soften, and they looked like normal, frightened children. Under the ground, they said together, their voices overlapping perfectly, where the old people sleep. Dr. Foster felt a chill run through her. She immediately called Sarah back into the room and had the conversation recorded. The girls continued to speak in fragments, describing an underground laboratory beneath the cemetery, a man in a white coat who performed experiments, and other children who went to sleep and never woke up. We were supposed to forget, Emma said sadly, but we remember the needle room. Ella continued. And the crying, they said together. Sarah and Dr. Foster realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than they had initially thought. These girls hadn't just been abandoned, they had been victims of something terrible. And they might be the key to uncovering a much larger crime. As the afternoon wore on, more fragments of memory began surfacing. The twins described being taken from somewhere safe, driven in a dark van and brought to the underground facility. They remembered other children, some older, some younger, but couldn't recall what happened to them. The man said we were special, Emma whispered. Because we're the same, Ella added. Sarah looked at the notes she had been taking, trying to piece together the horrifying picture that was emerging. Someone had been experimenting on children, using the abandoned cemetery as cover for their activities. And these two little girls had somehow escaped or been released, their memories partially intact despite attempts to erase them. The mystery was deepening, and Sarah knew they were just beginning to uncover the truth. In the pitch-black darkness of the underground laboratory, the team huddled together, their flashlights creating small circles of light in the oppressive darkness. The footsteps they had heard seemed to be moving through walls, suggesting there were more tunnels and passages than they had initially discovered. Everyone stay calm, Ray whispered, though his own voice betrayed his tension. Jenkins, keep Rex quiet. We don't want to give away our exact position. Sarah pulled out her phone, hoping for a signal, but the thick concrete and earth above them blocked all communication with the outside world. They were completely cut off, trapped in a place where terrible things had been done to children. Dr. Park examined the door mechanism with her flashlight. This is sophisticated, she whispered. Electronic locks, backup power systems. Whoever built this facility invested serious money and planning. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the darkness, seeming to come from speakers hidden in the walls. It was a man's voice, calm and educated, with a slight accent that Sarah couldn't place. Officers, you have discovered something that was meant to remain hidden, the voice said. I must admit I'm impressed by your detective work. The children weren't supposed to remember anything. Ray shone his flashlight around the room looking for cameras or speakers. Who are you? Show yourself. The man's laughter echoed through the laboratory. I am Dr. Marcus Kellner, and you are standing in my life's work. This facility represents years of research into memory manipulation and behavioral conditioning. The twins you found were my greatest success until they began to remember. Sarah felt rage building inside her. You tortured children. What kind of monster are you? Monster? Dr. Kellner's voice took on a defensive tone. I am a scientist. Do you know how many children suffer from traumatic memories? How many young minds are damaged by experiences beyond their control? I developed a way to give them clean slates, fresh starts. By kidnapping them? Ray shouted into the darkness. The children I worked with were already lost, Kellner replied. Runaways, orphans, children from broken homes. I gave them peace purpose. Most of them were successfully relocated to loving families with no memory of their painful pasts. Dr. Park discovered something that made her gasp. In one of the desk drawers, she found a ledger filled with handwritten entries. Each entry contained a child's name, age, treatment dates, and final placement information. The ledger contained records for over 60 children spanning the past 3 years. Ray, she whispered urgently, this has been going on for years. Dozens of children. Sarah noticed that many of the placement entries were marked with locations in different states, suggesting a network of people involved in relocating the children after their memories had been erased. The problem with Emma and Ella, Dr. Kellner continued, his voice now coming from a different direction. is that identical twins share neural patterns that make memory suppression more difficult. They began triggering each other's buried memories. I had to release them before they remembered too much. You mean before they could identify you? Sarah called out angrily. Precisely, but now you've found my work, and I cannot allow that knowledge to leave this place. The lights suddenly flickered back on, but they were dimmer than before, casting strange shadows throughout the laboratory. Through a window that hadn't been visible in the darkness, Sarah could see another room where a figure in a white lab coat was moving around, apparently preparing something. He's here, Jenkins whispered, pointing toward the window. Rex growled low in his throat, sensing the threat. Ray tried to approach the window, but discovered it was made of thick, bulletproof glass. Dr. Kellner looked up from his work and waved at them almost cheerfully. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looking every bit the respectable scientist he claimed to be. I'm afraid I cannot let you leave with knowledge of my work, Kellner said through the intercom system. However, I am prepared to offer you the same gift I gave the children. A clean slate. No memory of this place, no knowledge of what you've discovered. Never, Sarah shouted. We're police officers. When we don't report in, backup will come looking for us. Yes, but they don't know about this facility, do they? They'll find your vehicles at the cemetery. Assume you fell into one of the old unsealed tunnels. Tragic accident. It happens more often than you might think. Dr. Park was frantically examining the laboratory equipment, looking for anything they could use as a weapon or a way to escape. She discovered that several of the medical devices were connected to a central computer system. I might be able to disrupt his power supply, she whispered to Ray. If I can access the main control system, maybe I can unlock the doors. Meanwhile, Sarah found something that made her heart race. In a medical refrigerator, she discovered vials of the same compound that had been found in the twins' blood. But there were also vials labeled Memory Restoration Serum and Neural Pattern Enhancer. He has antidotes, she realized, ways to reverse what he did to the children. Through the window, they could see Dr. Kellner preparing a large syringe filled with a clear liquid. He held it up to the light, checking for air bubbles like any medical professional preparing an injection. The process is painless, his voice assured them. You'll simply fall asleep, and when you wake up, you'll remember nothing of the past week. You'll be found wandering in the city, confused but unharmed. The missing time will be attributed to stress and exhaustion. What about all the children you've experimented on? Ray demanded. Don't they deserve justice? Dr. Kellner paused in his preparations. Justice? I gave them new lives. Better lives. The children I worked with are now living with carefully selected families, happy and healthy, with no memory of whatever trauma brought them to my attention. That's not your choice to make, Sarah said firmly. Those children had identities, families who loved them, lives that belonged to them. Lives filled with pain and suffering, Kellner replied coldly. I removed that pain. Dr. Park had found the main computer terminal and was working frantically to hack into the system. The security was sophisticated, but she had discovered that the power grid controlling the locks was tied to the same system that monitored the experimental equipment. Almost got it, she whispered to the team. Just need a few more minutes. But Dr. Kellner had finished preparing his injection and was moving toward what appeared to be a concealed entrance to their room. Time was running out, and Sarah realized they might have to fight for their lives against a man who had been systematically destroying children's minds for years. Dr. Park's fingers flew across the keyboard as she tried to break through the security system. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, knowing that Dr. Kellner could appear at any moment with his memory-erasing injection. I'm in the main system, she whispered urgently, but there are multiple security layers. This man is extremely paranoid. Through the bulletproof window, they could see Dr. Kellner moving purposefully around his control room. He had put on surgical gloves and was checking various monitors that displayed what appeared to be surveillance feeds from throughout the underground facility. Sarah examined the vials of memory restoration serum more carefully. The labels included detailed instructions for dosage and administration. If we can get out of here, we might be able to help Emma and Ella recover their full memories, she told Ray, and possibly identify other victims, Ray added, studying the ledger Dr. Park had found. Look at these placement locations. There are addresses in 12 different states. Jenkins and Rex had positioned themselves near what they believed was the hidden entrance to their room. Rex's behavior had become increasingly agitated, and he kept pawing at a section of the wall that looked slightly different from the rest. "Found it," Jenkins called softly. "There's definitely a door here. Hidden, but Rex can smell whoever was here recently." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights started flashing, and Dr. Kellner's voice came over the intercom, sounding much less calm than before. "What have you done?" he demanded. "You're interfering with critical systems." Dr. Park looked up from the computer with a grim smile. "I've accessed his experimental logs. Every procedure he's ever done is documented here. Names, dates, locations where children were taken from and where they were sent afterwards." The information on the screen was overwhelming. File after file of children, their photographs, medical records, and detailed notes about their treatments. Some entries were marked as unsuccessful with notes like "subject expired during procedure" or "memory restoration impossible." "My God," Sarah breathed, reading over Dr. Park's shoulder. "He killed some of these children." Ray was photographing the ledger and the computer screens with his phone, trying to document as much evidence as possible. "Even if we don't make it out, this information needs to survive." Dr. Kellner's voice returned, now clearly angry. "You don't understand what you're destroying. Years of research, countless breakthroughs in neuroscience. I was on the verge of perfecting the process." "Perfecting torture," Sarah shot back. "Perfecting healing." Kellner's voice cracked with emotion. "Do you know what it's like to see a child's mind shattered by trauma? To watch them relive nightmares every day? I found a way to give them peace." Dr. Park continued working on the security system while the others documented evidence. Suddenly her screen flashed green. "Got it. I've unlocked the main door and disabled the backup locking mechanisms." The sound of the electronic lock disengaging echoed through the laboratory. But before they could celebrate, the hidden door Jenkins had found suddenly slid open, and Dr. Kellner stepped through, holding the large syringe. "I'm sorry it has come to this," he said, looking genuinely remorseful. "I had hoped to make this easier for all of you." Ray drew his weapon, pointing it at the doctor. "Put down the syringe and step away." Dr. Kellner shook his head sadly. "You cannot arrest me, detective. What I've done here will revolutionize how we treat childhood trauma. Shooting me would be like shooting the cure for cancer." "What you've done is kidnap and torture children," Sarah said, also drawing her weapon. "You stole their identities, their memories, their lives." "I gave them better lives," Kellner insisted. "The families I placed them with were carefully screened. Loving homes, stable environments. Those children are happy now." Jenkins moved to flank the doctor while Rex growled menacingly. "What about the children who died during your procedures?" Dr. Kellner's expression hardened. "Acceptable losses. Any breakthrough in medical science requires sacrifice. Those children contributed to something greater than themselves." Dr. Park had found something else on the computer system that made her gasp. "There are real-time monitoring systems. He's been tracking the children he placed. All of them. He has cameras in their new homes." The revelation that Dr. Kellner had been surveilling the children even after placing them with families added another horrifying dimension to his crimes. The computer showed feeds from bedrooms, playrooms, and family areas in houses across the country. "You've been watching them," Ray said, his voice filled with disgust. "Monitoring their progress," Kellner corrected, "ensuring the treatments were successful. Most of them have adapted beautifully to their new lives." Sarah noticed that Emma and Ella's file was still open on one of the monitors. It showed their location at the hospital and noted that their memory recovery was accelerating. There was also a notation that read, "Subjects must be retrieved for additional treatment." "You were planning to take them again," she realized. Dr. Kellner's grip on the syringe tightened. "The twins are a special case. Their shared neural patterns make them unique test subjects. I cannot allow them to fully recover their memories." "Because they could identify you in this place," Jenkins said. "Because they could undo everything I've accomplished," Kellner replied. "If word gets out about memory recovery, other subjects might begin to remember. Families would be torn apart. Children would return to traumatic situations I rescued them from." Dr. Park had been quietly working while the others kept Kellner talking. She had accessed his surveillance network and was downloading everything to a portable drive. "I've got all his files," she whispered to Sarah. "Every child, every location, every contact." Kellner seemed to realize that his situation was becoming desperate. His hand shook slightly as he held the syringe, and sweat was visible on his forehead despite the cool underground temperature. I need you to understand, he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. I'm not a monster. I'm a healer. I've dedicated my life to helping children overcome trauma. By stealing their lives, Ray said firmly, by making them disappear and giving them new identities without their consent. Children cannot consent to trauma treatment, Kellner argued. That's why parents and doctors make medical decisions for them. You're not their parent or their doctor, Sarah pointed out. You're a kidnapper who hides in tunnels under a cemetery. The standoff continued, but Sarah could see that Dr. Kellner was beginning to crack under the pressure. His carefully constructed justifications were falling apart in the face of the evidence they had uncovered. Soon they would have to decide whether to try to take him alive, or whether he would force them to use lethal force to protect themselves and the dozens of children whose lives he had stolen. The tension in the underground laboratory reached a breaking point as Dr. Kellner stood cornered, still clutching the syringe filled with his memory-erasing compound. His carefully composed demeanor was cracking, revealing the desperate man beneath the scientific facade. You don't understand the bigger picture, Kellner said, his voice becoming more frantic. I have contacts in 12 states, families who are counting on me, children who need treatment. If you expose this facility, you'll destroy a network that has helped hundreds of traumatized children. Dr. Park finished downloading the surveillance files and quietly unplugged her portable drive. The evidence she had gathered would be enough to shut down the entire operation and hopefully locate every missing child. Ray kept his weapon trained on Kellner while speaking calmly. Doctor, if you really want to help children, then help us now. Give us the locations of all the children, the names of your contacts, everything. Make this right. Make this right? Kellner laughed bitterly. You want me to destroy years of careful work? To traumatize children who are finally living normal lives? Some of them don't even remember their original names anymore. Sarah felt sick hearing him talk about erasing children's identities as if it were a medical treatment. That's exactly the problem. You stole who they were. Jenkins had been quietly moving closer to Kellner, using Rex as a distraction. German Shepherd continued to growl and pace, drawing the doctor's attention. When Kellner glanced at the dog, Jenkins lunged forward, grabbing for the syringe. The two men struggled and the syringe flew across the room, shattering against the wall. The clear liquid inside spread across the floor, hissing slightly as it mixed with moisture in the air. You've destroyed the only dose I had prepared, Kellner gasped as Jenkins wrestled him to the ground. That compound took me months to synthesize. Ray moved in to help subdue the doctor while Sarah collected the vials of memory restoration serum from the medical refrigerator. If Dr. Park was right about what these compounds could do, they might be able to help Emma and Ella recover completely. With Kellner in handcuffs, the team began the process of securing the underground facility. Dr. Park used the computer system to activate emergency lighting throughout the tunnel network, revealing the true scope of the operation. There were at least 6 additional rooms connected by passages, including what appeared to be living quarters where Kellner had been staying. No wonder no one could find him, Sarah observed. He's been living down here like some kind of mad scientist. In Kellner's living quarters, they found more evidence of his twisted worldview. Journals filled with detailed notes about each child he had processed, photographs of them before and after treatment, and disturbing observations about their behavioral changes. One journal entry particularly haunted Sarah. Subject 23, Jennifer, age 7, continues to ask for her mother despite 3 weeks of treatment, may need to increase dosage or consider termination of experiment. Ray discovered a communication system that Kellner had used to stay in contact with his network of accomplices. The messages revealed a sophisticated operation involving social workers, medical professionals, and families who believed they were participating in a legitimate adoption program. Some of these people might not even know the children were kidnapped. Ray realized, reading through the communications. He told them the kids were voluntary participants in a trauma recovery program. Dr. Park found the most crucial piece of evidence in Kellner's computer files: a master database containing the current locations and new identities of every child he had processed. The information was encrypted, but she was confident she could break the code. "This is it," she announced. "Every child he took, where they are now, who they're living with. We can reunite them with their real families. Kellner, sitting handcuffed on the floor, looked up with genuine anguish. You're going to destroy their lives. Some of those children have been with their new families for years. They have brothers and sisters now, parents who love them. You'll rip them away from the only homes they remember. They deserve to know who they really are, Sarah said firmly. Their biological families deserve to know they're alive. Their biological families failed them, Kellner shot back. That's how they ended up as runaways and orphans in the first place. Jenkins had been exploring the tunnel system and returned with disturbing news. There's a crematorium back there, industrial grade, and I found remains. The revelation that Kellner had been disposing of children who died during his experiments added murder charges to his crimes. The team would need a full forensics investigation to determine how many children had been killed in the underground facility. Dr. Park's analysis of the database revealed that Emma and Ella had been taken from a foster home in a neighboring state 6 months earlier. Their foster parents had reported them missing, but the case had gone cold when no leads developed. According to this, the twins were originally from Chicago, Dr. Park reported. Their biological mother is still alive and has been looking for them for 3 years. Sarah felt a mix of relief and sadness knowing that Emma and Ella had family, waiting for them, but also knowing how much trauma they had endured in the meantime. The team worked through the night, documenting evidence and preparing for the massive investigation that would follow. Federal authorities would need to be involved because of the multi-state nature of the crimes, and international agencies might be needed if any children had been trafficked across borders. As dawn approached, backup teams finally arrived at the cemetery after Ray's unit had failed to report in. The hidden entrance was secured, and specialist teams began the careful process of preserving the underground facility as a crime scene. Dr. Kellner was transported to the county jail, where he would await federal charges. As he was led away, he made one final statement to Sarah. You think you're saving these children, but you're condemning them to lives of pain and confusion. I gave them peace. You gave them nothing, Sarah replied. You stole everything. Standing in the cemetery as the sun rose over the tombstones, Sarah thought about Emma and Ella, still at the hospital, slowly recovering their memories. Soon, they would learn their real names, remember their mother, and begin the long journey of healing from the trauma Dr. Kellner had inflicted on them. But she also thought about the dozens of other children scattered across the country, living with families who didn't know their true identities, unaware that somewhere, their real families were still searching for them. The investigation was just beginning, and the process of reuniting these stolen children with their families would take months or even years. Dr. Kellner had claimed he was healing trauma, but Sarah knew the truth. He had created far more trauma than he had ever prevented, and the ripple effects of his crimes would be felt by countless families for years to come. 6 months after the discovery of Dr. Kellner's underground laboratory, Officer Sarah Martinez sat in the witness room at Mercy General Hospital, watching Emma and Ella through the one-way glass. The twins were playing with building blocks, their movements no longer the eerily synchronized actions that had haunted Sarah since that first morning in the park. Dr. Amanda Foster had been working with the girls throughout their recovery, using the memory restoration compounds found in Kellner's lab. The process had been slow and sometimes painful, as suppressed memories of trauma returned along with their true identities and recollections of their family. They remember their mother now, Dr. Foster told Sarah as they watched the girls play. Their real names are actually Emma and Ellie Patterson. They've been asking when they can go home. The twins' biological mother, Maria Patterson, had flown in from Chicago the day after their identities were confirmed. The reunion had been emotional and complicated, as the girls initially didn't recognize the woman who had been searching for them for 3 years. Through the window, Sarah could see Maria sitting with her daughters, reading them a story they remembered from before their kidnapping. The healing process was ongoing, but the family was finally together again. What about the other children? Sarah asked Dr. Foster. It's been mixed results, the doctor replied sadly. We've located and contacted 43 of the 67 children in Kellner's database. Some reunions have gone well, but others have been incredibly difficult. Many of the children had been with their placement families for years and considered them their real parents. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Dr. Kellner's operation. FBI agents had arrested 12 accomplices across 8 states, including social workers who had helped identify vulnerable children and medical professionals who had assisted with the memory suppression procedures. Detective Ray Coleman had been promoted and was now leading a federal task force dedicated to locating the remaining missing children. The case had become one of the largest child trafficking investigations in recent history. The legal challenges are enormous, Ray had told Sarah during a recent update. Some of the placement families genuinely believed they were adopting children through legitimate channels. They love these kids and don't want to give them up. Meanwhile, biological families who thought their children were dead are demanding their return. Sarah had testified at Dr. Kellner's trial, which had lasted 3 months and resulted in multiple life sentences without parole. The doctor had shown no remorse during the proceedings, maintaining that his work was scientifically valuable and that he had been helping traumatized children. The most disturbing revelation during the trial was the discovery that Kellner had been planning to expand his operation internationally. Investigators found evidence that he had been in contact with criminal organizations in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia about establishing similar facilities in countries with less stringent law enforcement. Dr. Park, the forensic specialist who had helped crack Kellner's computer systems, had become something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles. Her techniques for breaking encrypted child trafficking databases were now being taught to investigators worldwide. We found the crematorium contained the remains of at least 8 children, she had testified during the trial. Based on the evidence, these were children who either died during the memory suppression procedures or who were killed when the experiments failed. The cemetery where everything had begun was now permanently closed to the public. The city had decided to relocate the graves to other sites rather than risk any connection to the horrors that had taken place in the underground tunnels. Sarah often visited Emma and Ellie during their recovery, as they had formed a bond during those first terrifying hours in the park. The girls remembered her as the police officer who had found them and treated them with kindness when they were at their most vulnerable. "Officer Sarah," Emma called out when she spotted her through the window. "Come play with us." Dr. Foster opened the door, and Sarah entered the room where the twins were building elaborate structures with their blocks. Their personalities had fully returned, and they were clearly different individuals rather than the synchronized beings they had appeared to be under Kellner's influence. "We're building a house for all the kids who got lost," Ellie explained, carefully placing a block on top of her tower, "so they can find their families again." Maria Patterson looked up from her book with tears in her eyes. "They've been talking about the other children constantly. They want to help them somehow." Sarah knelt down beside the girls. "You've already helped them more than you know. Because you were brave enough to remember what happened, we were able to find where the other children were hidden." The investigation had also revealed that several of the placement families were actually part of a larger network that used the children for illegal activities. Some had been forced into child labor, while others had been exploited in ways that investigators were still uncovering. "Will all the kids get to go home?" Emma asked, looking up at Sarah with the serious expression that had become familiar during her recovery. "We're working very hard to make sure they do," Sarah replied honestly. "But some of them might need time to remember their families, just like you did." Dr. Foster had pioneered new techniques for memory recovery based on the compounds found in Kellner's laboratory. Her work was being studied by medical professionals around the world, as it offered hope for treating victims of other trafficking operations. The memory suppression drugs Kellner used were incredibly sophisticated, Dr. Foster explained to Sarah, but the restoration process we've developed could help other children who have been subjected to similar treatments. As Sarah prepared to leave the hospital, she reflected on how the case had changed her perspective on law enforcement. The discovery that children could be so systematically erased and recreated had shaken her faith in the systems designed to protect the innocent. But watching Emma and Ellie rebuild their lives, seeing other families reunited with children they thought they had lost forever, and knowing that Dr. Kellner would never harm another child gave her hope that justice could still prevail against even the most sophisticated evil. The twins ran up to hug her goodbye. their natural childlike energy a stark contrast to the robotic behavior they had displayed that first morning in the park. "Thank you for finding us," Emma whispered. "Thank you for helping us remember," Ellie added, as Sarah walked out of the hospital. She thought about the note the twins had left under the park bench. "We remember everything now." At the time, those words had seemed ominous and frightening. Now she understood them as a declaration of survival and hope. The case would officially remain open until every missing child was located, but Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. The families affected by Dr. Kellner's crimes would need years of support and healing. Some relationships might never be fully repaired, and some children might never fully recover their stolen memories. But Emma and Ellie Patterson were going home to Chicago the next week, and somewhere across the country, other families were being reunited with children they had never stopped searching for. In the end, that made all the nightmares and haunting discoveries worthwhile. The truth, no matter how terrible, was always better than the lie of a stolen life.